Hey guys, tonight we're stepping inside the cold stone walls of medieval monasteries, where devotion did not bring comfort but endless prayers, hard labor, and constant hunger. Forget the peaceful chants and glowing manuscripts of legend. The real life of a monk was tedious, punishing, and often cruel. So tonight we ask, what did it really mean to spend one day as a medieval monk? Your dawn began before sunrise, in ice-cold dormitories. Your body starved by ceaseless fasting, and every hour demanded work in kitchens, fields, or scriptoriums. Every era had its own trials, so let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always amazing to see whose journey we join tonight. Now, dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let's uncover the real monastery together. You wake long before dawn, stirred by the toll of a wooden bell echoing through the darkness. The sound is hollow and urgent, a summons to rise that cuts through your dreams like a cold blade through silk. Your body aches from yesterday's labor in the fields, and the chill of the unheated dormitory presses against your skin even beneath layers of coarse wool. You lie still for a moment, listening to the deep rumble of the bell fading into silence, and you remember why you chose this life. Of devotion, though now it feels more like a sentence than a calling. Slowly, you draw back the heavy wool coverlet and let your feet touch the rough stone floor. A wave of cold crawls up your legs and forces a shiver through your back. You draw your thin tunic closer and stand, pressing your hand against the wall for balance. Your eyes strain to make out shapes in the gloom. Wooden pallets line the chamber in neat rows, each occupied by a fellow monk or novice. The air is thick with the scent of damp straw and cold stone. You pad softly past your sleeping brother, hoping to avoid waking him as you gather your habit from the foot of your pallet. The coarse wool is stiff from yesterday's sweat, and musty from hours spent kneeling in prayer. You slip into the tunic and let the simple rope cinch it at your waist. You tuck your cowl beneath your chin and pull the hood over your head, tucking stray hair against your neck. Each movement is deliberate, practiced, meant to be conducted in silence and restraint. The bell tolls a second time, sharper now, an insistence that you cannot ignore. You step toward the chamber door, pausing at the threshold to nod briefly at the novice who stands guard. His eyes are heavy with sleep, but full of resolve. He lifts his hand in greeting and you return the gesture before slipping into the corridor. The corridor is narrow, lit only by the faint glow of a single lantern that someone left burning at the far end. Shadows dance across the rough plaster walls. Your breath puffs in small clouds of steam as you hurry toward the cloister. The chill seeps through your habit and nips at your fingertips. You round a corner and find the stairway that leads upward to the bell tower. 3 stories of stone steps wind high above the dormitory. Each step is slick with moisture that drips through the unsealed roof. You climb in near darkness, your heart pounding as you ascend toward the bell's source. At the top, you push open the heavy oak door and step into the tower's cavernous space. The bell hangs suspended by a thick wooden beam. Its surface is studded with iron nails, worn smooth by centuries of use. A single candle burns in a bracket on the wall, casting a flicker of light over the massive mechanism. You cross the creaking floorboards with reverence and stand before the bell as if before an altar. It is your duty to ring the first call to prayer. You draw the rope that hangs within reach and grip it firmly with both hands. The wood is cold and grainy. You close your eyes and steady yourself, gathering the strength needed to swing the bell's heavy clapper. Then, you pull and lean back with all your weight. The rope creaks and groans before the bell answers, with a mighty peal that reverberates through every stone pillar of the monastery. The sound rolls outward across the cloister, stirring brothers in distant cells and novices still curled in blankets. You feel a surge of purpose as the echoes fade. This is the first service of the day, the vigil that marks the end of night and the start of devotion. Yet even as you stand in the silence that follows, you feel the ache in your arms from the effort of ringing, the cold sweat cooling on your brow. You draw the rope once more for a second toll, and then again for a third. With each stroke, the bell's voice grows fainter until the towers fall silent. You release the rope and let it fall slack. Sweat beads on your temples. You brush your sleeve across your forehead and catch a chill that snaps your breath sharp in your chest. A small door leads from the bell chamber to a narrow balcony. You step outside and brace yourself against the rising wind. Below you, the courtyard lies blanketed in shadows. The few lanterns that burn near the refectory flicker in the pre-dawn gloom. You feel the vast emptiness of the grounds spread before you, a reminder that the world beyond the monastery walls still slumbers while you have already fulfilled your first duty. You close the balcony door and descend the stairs to the chapter house, where the first prayers will begin. Each step down is heavier than the one before. Your muscles protest the cold and the early hour. You pull your hood tighter and hurry toward the great hall. The corridors are lined with faded tapestries and carved wooden statues of saints whose faces are worn by time. At the chapter house door, you pause to gather your thoughts. Through the lattice, you see flickering candles around a stone altar. You take a breath and step inside, joining the circle of monks already kneeling before the altar. The murmur of voices rises in unison as the first chant begins. The words are ancient Latin verses that roll off your tongue with familiar ease. Yet behind each syllable you feel the physical toll of your vow. The sleepless nights, the frozen mornings, the constant ache in your bones. The service lasts an hour or more, your knees burn where they kneel on stone, and your back protests from the strain of bowing. The candle flickers low and tiny beads of wax drip to the floor. You struggle to keep your thoughts from wandering to the memory of last night's meager supper. You recall the hard bread and lentils that barely filled your stomach. You taste hunger as fiercely as you taste the chanting smoke in your nostrils. When the vigil ends, you rise with your brethren and cross yourselves before the altar. You file out into the corridor and make your way to the wash basins. Here you splash cold water on your face and hands to wash away the ash from candle smoke. The cold is a shock to your flesh. You gasp and catch your breath, feeling the skin on your cheeks tighten with cold. Your next task awaits in the refectory. You follow the lantern glow down a side aisle into the kitchen wing. Here, a handful of monks and lay servants stoke the hearths and prepare the morning's simple meal. The firelight casts long shadows over iron cauldrons, hanging above glowing coals. You see the cook ladle thin porridge into wooden bowls and sprinkle a handful of barley on top. You take your place at the serving table and don a rough apron over your habit. You scoop steaming porridge and set bowls before each brother in the refectory below. The smell of cooked grain and simmering broth rises in the cold air, offering a faint comfort against the morning chill. Yet you know this meal is no feast. It is the first of many meager servings that will sustain you until evening prayer. As you finish serving, you pause and glance back at the dormitory you left an hour ago. The stone walls rise silently toward the grey sky. Inside those walls, you have already answered the first bell and knelt through vigil prayer. You have climbed to the bell tower, summoned your brothers to worship, and endured the cold of unheated quarters. In a single hour, you have lived more hardship than many would in a lifetime. You take a deep breath and steady your shoulders. The day ahead will demand more. Hours of chanting, hours of copying scriptures by candlelight, hours of labor in the fields. Yet for now you have fulfilled the first duty of dawn. You have answered the bell and stepped into the life of a medieval monk, a life of devotion and suffering that only the most steadfast can endure. You taste the porridge on your tongue and know that this day, like every day before it, will begin in darkness and end with the hope of peace that comes only after true sacrifice. You leave the chapter house and descend a short flight of stone steps into the dark corridor. Your footsteps echo softly as you make your way toward the washrooms. Light from a single candle flickers against rough plaster walls. You slip off your robe and towel yourself with a coarse linen cloth. Cold water from a stone basin splashes across your face and hands. You taste grit and lime in every drop. Your skin tightens as you rub the cloth across your cheeks and forehead until the sting becomes manageable. Once you have washed, you pull your robe back on and adjust the rope that binds it at the waist. You smooth the folds so that your habit falls evenly over your tunic. You tie the cords twice before you walk onto the cloister. The air here is still, and holds the faint scent of earth from the gardens beyond. You pause beneath an arched arcade of columns to steady your breathing. Above you, the sky is a pale grey that promises rain or sleet. You brace yourself for whatever the morning may bring. You step through the cloister into a square courtyard lined by grass and low shrubs. Frost clings to the leaves and glimmers in the muted light. Stone benches stand empty beside the path that leads to the refectory. In the center, you see a small fountain carved in the shape of a simple cross. Its water has frozen into a thin sheet of ice that cracks under your boot. You take care to place your foot on solid flagstone. Ahead lies the refectory hall, where the first prayers of the day are held. You enter through heavy wooden doors carved with scenes of saints and scholars at work. Inside, the room is long and narrow, with a table running its full length. You and the other brothers move quietly into your assigned places. You kneel on the cold stone floor at the base of the table and fold your hands. Your breath comes in steady puffs that rise toward the vaulted ceiling. A senior monk steps forward to begin the office of Lords. He opens a large book bound in leather and places it on a carved wooden stand. The pages bear ancient script and illuminated letters painted in red and blue. He intones a hymn in Latin, and the brothers respond in measured voices. The words speak of light breaking the darkness and the dawn of the world. You feel each syllable resonate in your chest as you join in the response. After the hymn, you rise and take the psalter from a shelf on the wall. You find the correct psalm by following the rubric at the top of the page. You open the book and let your finger mark the line. You bow your head and recite the words aloud. Your voice echoes in the hall and blends with the flicker of candlelight. Each psalm praises creation or seeks mercy from God. You feel the weight of your years and your sins in every verse. When the psalm ends, you close the book and kneel once more before the table. The senior monk reads a short lesson from the writings of an early father of the church. You listen to words of wisdom and struggle to keep your mind from wandering back to the cold dormitory or the empty bowl you will soon fill. You remind yourself of the vow you took to seek truth and live in humility. After the lesson comes the canticle of Benedictus. Each voice swells in harmony as the candles burn lower. You feel warmth flow through your limbs as you sing of visiting mercy and salvation. The final note fades and leaves only the stillness of the morning. You bow your head and breathe deep, tasting smoke and wax on your tongue. The service ends with a simple prayer and the sign of the cross. You rise and step back from the table. A brother hands you a small loaf of blessed bread marked with a cross in red wine. You take it with reverence and place it in your robe's pocket. This morsel will sustain you later when hunger gnaws at your resolve. You bow to each side of the hall and leave the refectory in silence. Outside, you head to the infirmary wing where the sick and the elderly receive care. You have volunteered to assist this morning. You enter a narrow room lined with beds draped in threadbare blankets. Each patient lies still or murmurs as you pass. You carry a basin of warm water and a towel. You kneel beside an old monk whose hair has turned white with age. His breathing is shallow and his skin pale. You wash his face gently and wipe away the crust of sleep from his eyelids. He opens one eye and smiles weakly. You hear the crackle of his bones as he sits upright with your help. You offer him a bowl of broth from the kitchen. He sips with gratitude and nods once. You bow your head and promise to return this evening with more. After tending the infirm, you slip back through the cloister toward the scriptorium. The day's work there will begin after breakfast. As you pass the courtyard fountain, you pause again to let the silence fill you. You feel the weight of each moment, the promise of service, and the inevitability of fatigue. You taste hope and dread on the cold air. You reach the scriptorium door and open it with a soft creak. Inside, you see long tables lit by narrow windows. Scrolls and parchments lie ready beside quills and ink pots. Monks sit hunched over their work, copying texts letter by letter. Their robes brush against the wood floor as they move. You find your place at a bench and bow before the master scribe. He nods and hands you a fresh sheet of vellum. You set your quill to the ink and feel the tip catch on the skin. You draw a breath and begin to copy the first line of the gospel. Each stroke is precise and slow. The lamplight glows in the corner as you trace the letters. Your hand aches already, but you continue without complaint. You know that by midday you will have filled many pages with careful calligraphy. And so your first hours of life in the monastery pass. You rise before dawn to prayers and washing. You chant and recite psalms beneath candlelight. You tend the sick and help copy sacred texts. You feel cold in your bones and hunger in your belly. Yet you also feel a deeper warmth in service and prayer. You remember why you came here and vow to endure whatever trials the day may bring. You would not last a moment beyond these walls if you doubted your purpose. But for now, you embrace the discipline and the devotion that shape the monastic life. You rise from the refectory feeling the ache in your shoulders from last night's service and make your way into the cloister garden without a word. The vow of silence weighs as heavily as your wet tunic, and your wooden clogs echo softly on the stone floor. In each courtyard arch you pass, a brother offers a curt nod, and you return the gesture. No voice interrupts the morning light as you pull your sleeves over your wrists and kneel before the first task of the day. A single bucket of water stands beside the entrance to the chapter house. You dip your linen cloth into the cold liquid and wring it until the last drop drips back into the pail. You crouch by the stone threshold and scrub at the carved letters that spiral around the jamb. Each stroke sends thin ribbons of dirt and old wax pooling at your knees. Your hands stiffen in the chill, but you press on until the stone appears pale and clean beneath a veil of damp. From there, you move to the hall, where long slabs of oak await your attention. You dip a second rag into an iron basin brimming with water and lye. The soap bubbles hiss as you rub the floorboards. You work in tight circles, pressing your weight into each pass. Your tunic gathers damp at your back, and you taste the sharp tang of lye on your tongue. Your muscles protest with every sweep. You scrape at the grout between boards until even the smallest crack gleams free of moss and rot. Once the floor shines, you stand, rub your palms together, and leave the basin behind. You cross the cloister to fetch the next pail. A wooden well bucket hangs by a rope thick with moss. You lower it into the depths and wait as the rope creaks beneath the weight. You draw the bucket up, water sloshing over its rim, and balance it on your hip. You hear the faint murmur of the fountain at the garden's heart and carry the water there with careful steps. In the herb plot, you pour fresh water around the roots of sage and mint. The droplets soak into the soil and release a faint scent that rises in the morning air. You kneel by a row of chamomile and thin away the weeds that crowd each stem. Your fingers brush against soft petals, and the earth beneath them feels cool and alive. You place the weeds in a woven basket at your side, and nod when the novice gardener offers a silent prayer of thanks. The next chore calls you back inside to polish the iron candlesticks that line the chapel altar. Each candlestick bears the blackened marks of burning tallow. You hold one aloft and buff its surface with a cloth dipped in vinegar. The iron gleams where you work until the brass drip pans glint like small suns. You wipe the final smudge from your palm and set the candlestick upright. The chapel will be ready for mid-morning prayer when the brothers enter. Your route loops back through the cloister toward the dormitory steps. Here you find a pile of straw left over from yesterday's bedding. You gather it in your arms and carry it to the infirmary wing. A sick brother lies huddled beneath a thin blanket. You spread fresh straw beneath him to lift him from the cold floor. He shifts and opens his eyes, offering you a grateful smile. You bow your head and retreat without exchanging a single word. By noon, the chores return you to the sunken fountain that marks the garden's center. Dark water laps at a shallow basin in the shape of a cross. You clear away fallen leaves and stir the water with a ladle until it ripples across the carved stone. A few fish glide beneath the surface, their scales shining like fragments of glass. You drop a handful of grain flakes into the water and watch as the fish gather to feed. You pause to let the moment of quiet fill your mind. Your chores are far from done. In the refectory courtyard, you stack wooden chairs against the walls. Each bench must rest on its end to prevent warping in the damp. You lift each bench with careful balance, setting it upright on two legs before rotating it until the legs rest against the stone. You work in silence, focusing on angle and weight to avoid a wrong move that could crack the wood. Later, you fetch a wheelbarrow to gather the garden's pruning waste. You trim back overgrown laurel and boxwood knots that threaten to crowd the paths. Each snip of your shears sends a twig clattering to the wheelbarrow's bed. You fill the barrow until it groans beneath the weight. Then you wheel the load to the compost heap behind the barn. You tip the branches into the pile and rake them smooth before lifting the barrow back to the garden. In the afternoon light, the cloister feels more alive. Bees hum among the rosemary shrubs and a breeze ripples across the grass, yet your vow of silence holds firm. You and your brothers share no more than glances and gestures. A novice presses his fist to his chest in gratitude when you offer him a handful of water for his empty flask. You return the gesture and continue your path. The final chore of the day is to scrub the kitchen hearth. Flames have blackened the stones with soot and ash. You sprinkle cold water over the hearth and feel the steam hiss as it meets hot air. You scrape at the charcoal deposits with a metal spade until the surface is free of residue. Ashy dust settles on your sleeves and you brush it away before stepping back. As the sun sets, you return each tool to its hook and bow to your brothers for their help. You end the day as you began it, in silence and reverence. You draw a deep breath and let the weight of your service settle in your bones. The cloister's chores have tested your strength and your spirit. Yet in every stroke of the mop and every pail of water, you have knelt in devotion to a life that demands endless labor beneath vow-bound lips. And in that devotion you have found a fierce pride that will carry you through dawn once more. After the fire in the kitchen hearth has been cleaned, you move to the next task in the cloister. A row of windows overlooks the herb garden. Each pane is streaked with rain and dust. You fill a wooden bucket with fresh water from the fountain and carry it silently to the windows. A scrap of linen cloth becomes your only tool. You dip it into the water and wring it out until only a curtain of moisture drips back into the bucket. You wipe in vertical strokes from sill to lintel, watching as streaks vanish and light returns to the glass. With one window done, you kneel on the cool stone ledge and wipe the sill beneath it. You push away fallen petals and stray leaves from the morning pruning. You follow each groove in the carved stone with your fingertips until no trace of debris remains. You straighten and move to the next window. By the time you finish this chore, your cloak is damp at the elbows, and your hands are pruned from the water. You leave the bucket by the well and turn your attention to the wooden shutters. The shutters hang beside each window like sentinels waiting to open or close. You lift the first and set it flat on the floor. A small pile of dust rests along its edges. You dip your cloth into a mixture of vinegar and water and scrub each shutter plank until the grain appears bright and new. You test the hinges with a gentle push and hear the metal grind softly. You oil each pivot point with a few drops of olive oil from a clay jar. The shutters swing open silently. You stow the jar and repeat at every window in the cloister. Now the tables in the refectory must be cleared and prepared for the midday meal. Bowls and cups stand ready at each place. You enter without a word. A fellow brother hands you a basket of spent straw. You drop it under the benches and sweep the floor with a bundle of twigs bound together. You gather crumbs of bread and husks of grain, feeding them to a group of chickens clucking just outside the door. You return to the benches and lift each one to hang upright against the wall. The floor reveals patterns of dust and mud that you brush away. Refugees of midday bustle have prepared porridge in cauldrons by the hearth. The kitchen boy ladles steaming servings into wooden bowls. You carry each bowl to the table on a flat tray and place it before each monk. You feel the heat rise through the tray into your palms. You steady yourself and set the tray down. A simple nod passes between you and the server in thanks. No words are needed. After the meal, the bowls return empty. You collect them one by one. Each bowl bears the stain of barley or lentils. You rinse them in clean water and stack them beside the cauldron. A pot scrubber of rough pumice rests by the hearth. You scour each bowl until no residue clings and set it on a shelf to dry. Your arms ache with the motion of bending and lifting. You let a small tide of fatigue settle in your limbs before moving on. The dormitories require straightening now that morning prayers are complete. You climb the narrow stair to the sleeping quarters. Straw pallets lie in rows. Some remain unmade from the night. You remove the thin blankets and roll each one tightly. You lay the roll at the foot of its pallet, aligning them all in precise formation. Then you lift each pallet and shake the straw to redistribute it evenly. You scrub the linen sheets with your hands in a basin of water and hang them on a clothesline in the open courtyard. The breeze catches the fabric and the wet cloth snaps softly in the air. You return downstairs to gather fresh linen for the infirm. The old monk waits silently in his bed. You smooth new sheets beneath him and tuck him in. You adjust his pillow made from torn cloth bundles. You press a cool cloth to his brow. You wash the dish he used the night before and pour a fresh cup of water. He drinks without a word and closes his eyes in gratitude. Outside the cloister, you find the goat barn. The gardener needs help with the morning milk. You enter the low building and squat beside the doe. You hold a wooden pail beneath her udder and gently squeeze. Warm milk flows into the pail in steady rivulets. You fill 2 pails before the animal rests again. You lift 1 pail at each side and carry them back through the garden to the kitchen. You pour the milk into a large jar and wipe the rim clean. The cream clings to the sides. You cover the jar and leave it to settle away from spoilage. The final chore is the garden gate. Vines have grown across its hinges. You snap a pair of shears from your belt and cut back the tendrils. You gather the clippings in a basket. Each vine gives a soft pop as you snip. You clear the path until the gate swings freely with a smooth creak. You oil the wooden latch and step back to admire the boundary between cloister and world. As midday approaches, the tasks draw to a close. You return each tool to its place. Buckets stand dry beside the well. Mops hang from pegs in the corridor. Garden tools rest on racks near the herb plot. The cloister is ready for the next service. You pause beneath the archway and feel the sun warm your hood. You taste the clean air after hours of scrubbing and hauling and tending. You have kept your vow of silence and served without complaint. Your body aches in every joint. Your hands bear the faint smell of vinegar and earth. Yet you also feel the steady pulse of purpose in your chest. You remember why you took your vows. You recall the call to devote every minute to prayer and labor. You find pride in the work you have done. The bell tolls for the next office. You cross yourself and step toward the cloister arch, ready to chant once more beneath unheated walls and flickering candlelight. You would not last a day beyond these corridors if you doubted your place here. But for now, you embrace the chores and the stillness and the vow that guides you through each silent hour. You rise before dawn into a world of grey light and biting chill. Your wool tunic hangs loose over your shoulders, threadbare at the seams from years of wear. You feel the weight of your vow of poverty as you step onto the cold stone floor of the dormitory. The blankets have been stripped away for prayer, and you shiver in the thin habit that barely shields you from the damp air. Each breath feels like a shard of ice in your lungs. Hunger gnaws at your belly as fiercely as the cold nips your toes. You make your way to the refectory for the first meal of the day. The tables stand empty except for one cracked wooden bowl at each bench. You step forward and receive a single crust of barley bread and a sip of water drawn from the cloister well. You break the bread into small pieces and chew slowly, squeezing every ounce of sustenance from its rough crumb. You swallow and taste dust more than grain. You raise the bowl to your lips and sip water until the cold liquid settles the ache in your throat. After the brief meal, you return to your cell to retrieve your cloak. You slip it over your shoulders and tie the rope belt tight at your waist. The fabric offers little warmth, but you cling to it as if to a friend. You step into the cloister courtyard and feel the wind whip through the columns. Frost glimmers on the grass and rubs against the hem of your cloak. You pull the hood over your head and press your hands together, seeking comfort in prayer even as the cold steals away your strength. Your first duty leads you to the herb garden, where the plants shiver under a coat of ice. You kneel among the frozen rows and tug at wilted shoots with numb fingers. Each plant feels brittle and unyielding beneath your touch. You gather the herbs that remain viable and place them in a small basket. You imagine the warmth of a simple poultice made from these herbs, yet you know that the infirmary has no fire for long jars of steeped tea. You carry the basket back to the kitchen, shoulders hunched against the wind. Midday brings the washing of robes in the courtyard trough. You stand ankle-deep in cold water and scrub at your own habit with a handful of ash soap. The water cuts through your robes and seeps to your skin. You feel every seam tighten against your flesh. You scrub until the fabric turns a paler shade of grey. You lift the robe and drain the water from the trough before dragging the garment to a low wall to dry. You wrap your cloak tighter and press your back against the stone for fleeting warmth. In the afternoon, you tend the fires in the kitchen hearth. You carry a bucket of kindling and stack the sticks in the grate. You strike flint against steel until a spark catches. You watch as the small flame climbs the wood. You feel a surge of hope as the fire grows, yet you know it will not last. Soon the logs will burn down to embers and you will be left with only cold coals and the memory of heat. You tend the fire as if it were a precious gift, careful not to let it die. Evening prayer gathers you and your brothers in the chapel. You kneel on the stone floor without cushion or mat. You chant verses that speak of God as a refuge in times of trouble. You feel the words echo hollow against the cold walls. Your breath puffs in the air before you as you bow and rise with the rest. Each movement reminds you of the vow to endure hardship without complaint. You press your lips together, determined to follow your calling, even as the chill threatens to break your resolve. After prayer, you return to the dormitory. You find a thin blanket folded at your pallet and drape it over your shoulders like armor. You pull the small wooden shutter closed against the wind. You lie down on the hard straw mattress and curl into a ball. You pray for a moment of warmth, a single hour without tremors in your arms and legs. Yet you know that warmth comes only from the fire you tended, and now must share with all. You hear the last brother settle beside you and feel the thin sound of his breathing. You close your eyes and let fatigue wash over you. Your body remembers the freezing tasks of the day, and every bone aches in protest. Still, you hold fast to your vow. You taste the cold on your tongue, even in sleep. You whisper a final prayer that tomorrow you will rise once more to serve in silence and poverty, finding strength in humility. When dawn arrives, you will wake again to the wooden bell sounding in the tower. You will shiver as you rise and feel the icy floor beneath your feet. You will break your bread, wash your robes, tend the fire, and pray without cease. You will endure the hunger and the cold because you have chosen this life of devotion. And in that endurance you will find a fierce pride born of knowing that you have survived another day on scant rations and wool alone. You rise before sunrise into the biting cold once more and pull your cowl tighter around your head. The vow of poverty means you own only this thin habit and a single cloak. Its fabric is worn threadbare at the elbows. You step into the common washroom and draw water from a stone trough. Your fingers ache as you rub them together to stoke warmth into frozen flesh. You lean over the basin and splash water on your face until the shock of cold chases away the last sleep. You carry a bucket of water through the cloister toward the barn. Here, the livestock must be fed. You ladle icy water into troughs for the goats and sheep. They bleat softly as you approach and nuzzle your hands for grain. You hold out a handful of barley, scarce even at the best of times. The animals snap at each kernel in hunger. You feel guilt in their pleading eyes because your own hunger gnaws at you still sharper than any winter wind. After feeding the animals, you fetch the old work gloves from their hook by the stable door. Inside, they are lined with straw, but the lining has long since fallen away. You slip them on and head into the barn's corner where a pile of frozen timber waits. Each log is stiff with frost. You swing an axe and split the wood so that it will burn more quickly. Splinters scatter across the floor and the iron head thuds against the grain. You feel the sweat bead on your brow even though the air is frigid. Your arms burn from the swings and your legs tremble as you work. You stack the split wood in the small shed beside the barn door. The stack is already half empty from last night's fire. The refectory hearth burned through most of the pile. You know, tomorrow you will haul more timber from the forest and return here by midday soaked in snow and exhaustion. You close the shed and wipe your hands on your habit before you go. The next task is to mend shoes. You carry a wooden bench and an iron kettle of melted pitch back to the cobbler's alcove beneath the cloister. Here, a single lamp burns perpetually to soften leather and drive out moisture. The alcove smells of tar and old hide. You select your boots, the soles half worn through and the leather cracked along every seam. You dip a strip of leather into the tar and press it against the crack. You let the melted pitch seep into the tear before smoothing it with a carved bone tool. Your thumbs ache, but you force your mind to focus on setting each stitch correctly. When your boots are repaired, you slip them on and test each step. The new patch holds firm. You nod in relief because walking through deep snow with torn soles would be certain misery. You gather the tools and rinse the pitch kettle in cold water. The kettle hisses and black fumes rise. You wipe away soot with a strip of rag and leave the alcove behind you. At midday, you return to the refectory for the second meal. The benches stand in place now. You kneel and receive half a bowl of barley gruel and watered-down wine. You feel the cold retreat a little as the broth warms your belly. You swallow slowly and let the flavor expand in your mouth. The wine still carries a sharp tang that bites at your tongue, but you welcome it. You finish your portion and leave the hall in silence. Your next duty takes you to the scriptorium. The other monks labor here by candlelight regardless of the hour. You have little skill with the quill, but you assist by preparing parchment. You carry a tray of water to the work table and dip each sheet of animal skin into it. You flatten the damp parchment beneath a heavy board. Moisture fills the pores, and the surface stiffens, ready to receive ink. You repeat this for dozens of sheets until your arms grow tired and your fingers prune from the damp. After the parchment is done, you fetch oak gall ink from the storeroom. The jar sits on a high shelf. You stand on a stool and reach above your head. You nearly lose your balance when you slip on a stray scrap of paper. You catch yourself against the shelf and swing free. You hold the ink jar close and climb down. You steady yourself on the floor and set the jar on the table. You wipe your brow and taste iron in your mouth. This afternoon's final task is to gather moss for the infirmary. Moss from the wall stones is used as padding for wounds and as a dressing. You exit the cloister through the garden gate and circle the outer walls. Stones here are dark with algae and thick clumps of moss. You pluck handfuls and tuck them into a basket. You feel moisture cling between your fingers and watch droplets shake free in the breeze. Your arms ache by the time you finish the circuit. You carry the basket back to the infirmary tent beneath the eastern wall. A handful of lay sisters tend the wounded here, according to the rule. You kneel and pass the moss to them. They offer you a small nod in gratitude. You hold your breath against the smell of antiseptic herbs and unwashed flesh. You stand and step away quickly. Evening approaches and the sun dips low behind the blackened eaves. You return to the dormitory to drop off your cloak and join the brothers for vespers. You kneel without a word and chant the evening office. The cold permeates the unheated hall. You press your hands together and feel the raw edges of your repaired gloves rub against your skin. You bow your head and let your breath echo in the silence. When the service ends, you slip back into your cell. You find the thin blanket at the foot of your pallet and wrap it across your shoulders. You kneel and offer a short prayer of thanks for the strength to endure. You feel hunger still linger in your gut. You long for warmth beyond the thin fabric and for a meal more satisfying than barley gruel. But you have chosen this life. You have sworn the vow to live in poverty and cold. You climb onto the straw mattress and curl into yourself. Tomorrow you will rise again to haul water scrub floors, tend the garden, repair shoes, prepare parchment, and gather moss. You will commune with the vow that binds you to this place. You will know hunger and cold more keenly than any knight knows steel and battle. You will endure every hardship without complaint. And in that endurance you will find a peace that only comes from total surrender to a life of humble service. You finish the evening office and leave the chapel by lantern light, your belly empty and aching. A single bowl of thin broth served at sunset has been your last meal. You carry only a small scroll and a flat wooden bench as you cross the cloister toward the night vigil. Every step echoes in the silent courtyard, and frost glitters on the flagstones. You draw your cowl tighter, though it offers scant protection against the cold that gnaws at your bones. In the chapter house, the brothers gather once more around the stone altar. Candles gutter in the draught, their flames dancing like restless spirits. The air is thick with incense and the soft rustle of robes. You kneel on the cold floor, jaw clenched against the hollow pain in your stomach. Hunger rumbles like distant thunder, sharper than any blade you have held. The precentor opens a large volume of antiphons and begins the invitatory for the night office. You join in the psalmody, your voice low and steady. Yet every chant stretches out, measured and slow, as your body craves the warmth and solidity of even a stale crumb of bread. You breathe through the ache, tasting the sweetness of prayer mingled with the bitterness of emptiness. After the invitatory comes the first nocturne. You rise from your knees and stand before your brothers. Each voice intones a verse of Psalm 8, praising the heavens and the work of hands. You feel the juxtaposition of your lofty words and the gnawing reality in your gut. You push down a gasp as your stomach twists and tighten your cloak around your waist. When the psalm ends, you move to a small desk at the side wall. There you find a narrow bench for silent meditation. You sit and fold your hands, head bowed. The draft of unsealed windows chills your back. You press your palms together and let your mind focus on a single line of scripture. You feel the hunger sharpen beneath your ribs until it flares in your throat. You quell a moan by pressing your lips to the stone wall. A brother brings a pail of water and a towel. He sets them beside the bench and returns to his own vigil post without a word. You dip your fingers into the water and rub them across your face. The cold liquid stings and sharpens your senses. You wring the towel and fold it neatly before you. The contact of fabric against your skin reminds you of all you have renounced for this life. The second nocturne begins as the chapel bell tolls softly in the distance. You rise and join the procession that moves through the darkened aisles. Lanterns glow in iron sconces along the walls. The scent of myrrh and juniper burns in the air. You chant the psalms of lament and hope. Each verse brings a fresh wave of hunger. Each refrain echoes your longing for warmth and sustenance. When the Canticle of Simeon is finished, you slip out of the chapter house and into the dormitory corridor. The novices lie asleep on their straw pallets. You pass them with a silent greeting and head for the infirmary. A frail brother lies burning with fever on a narrow pallet. You kneel and press a jug of cold water to his lips. He drinks in shallow gulps, then chokes on the flow. You wipe his chin with gentle fingers. His gratitude is a faint gleam in his eyes, but it does nothing to quell the turmoil in your own gut. Dawn approaches, but you will not break your vigil. You return to the nave for the third nocturne. The candles have burned low, and the benches are slick with wax. You settle on a kneeler near the altar and bow your head. The precentor reads from the prophet Isaiah, words of exile and deliverance. You feel the hunger sharpen into a blade as your stomach clenches. You test your resolve and press your palms more tightly together. Silence stretches between the readings. You hear only your own breathing and the soft drip of a candle guttering. You taste emptiness so keen you imagine it might carve your soul. Yet you hold fast and let the silence fill you with something fiercer than hunger. When the final prayer ends, you rise unsteadily. The first light of dawn filters through the rose window, painting the stone floor in pale gold. Your stomach growls once more as you cross the sanctuary toward the refectory. Brothers there await the first meal, their breath visible in the pale morning air. You remove your cowl and step forward without complaint. At the serving table, you receive a single loaf of barley bread and a goblet of warmed water. You break the loaf with trembling fingers and press your lips to its rough crust. You taste the promise of life and the sting of sacrifice. You drink deeply and feel warmth spread through your chest. The hunger retreats like a receding storm, leaving you bruised but unbroken. You bow your head in silent thanks and sit to eat the morning meal in companionable silence. Hunger remains a memory in your belly, sharper than steel and yet conquered by the smallest gift of sustenance. You lift your eyes and meet the gaze of your brothers. Each bears the same trace of exhaustion and exaltation. You rise together for the morning office, knowing that the fast will resume tonight. Yet, you carry with you the fierce pride of having endured the vigil. You have fasted through the hours of darkness, held to your promise, and tasted devotion more keenly than any earthly hunger. You stand in the refectory after the dawn office, and feel the hollow echo of your own footsteps on stone. Your stomach clenches with the memory of yesterday's meager meal and the promise of nothing until sunset. You distribute bowls of cold water to the brothers who join you at the long table. The liquid is clear and thin and barely fills the ache in your throat. You bow your head and sip slowly, each mouthful a sting of reality. Hunger presses against your ribs like an iron band. The master of the kitchen passes by with a single loaf of barley bread. He breaks it into 2 pieces and hands one to you. You accept it with a silent nod. The loaf is hard and dry. You taste dust and chaff before it softens under your tongue. You chew every bite deliberately. Each crumb feels like a small triumph over the emptiness in your belly. When you finish, you fold the remains of your tunic over the table and wipe your lips. You rise and move to the scriptorium. The candle flames have guttered low overnight, and you carry a lantern to guide your steps. You find a seat at a carved bench. The vellum manuscript lies open before you, and the black ink glints in the lamplight. Your tongue rolls the words on your lips as you recite them mentally. You seek solace in the Psalms, even as your stomach roars in silent protest. You dip your quill and trace each letter with care. The hours pass slowly as you copy text. Sweat beads on your brow despite the cold air. The muscles in your arm ache from the constant movement of pen on parchment. The lantern smoke curls around your head and stings your eyes. Hunger gnaws at your concentration. You force yourself to focus on the words of praise rather than the empty space in your gut. You copy the passage about bread from heaven and wonder if the words will ever taste as sweet as the hunger makes them seem. When the midday bell tolls, you rise and walk in silence to the chapter house. The benches stand empty, but you kneel and recite the midday office alone. Your voice echoes in the vaulted space. The psalm of praise falls from your lips with a hollow weight. You bow your head for the prayer of thanksgiving. You pray in Latin for patience in your discipline. You ask for strength to bear the fast until the hours of evening. You close your eyes and let the echoes fill your mind. You leave the chapter house and return to the cloister garden. The air here holds the faint scent of earth warmed by the sun. You kneel before a patch of wild mint. You pull a handful of leaves and crush them between your palms. The aroma rises and fills your nose like a gentle balm. You inhale deeply and taste hope in the sharp fragrance. You press the mint to your mouth and place a leaf on your tongue. The cool sweetness eases the ache in your throat for a moment. Next, you fetch straw from the store near the barn. You carry it on your shoulder to the infirmary. You reach the bed of the old monk who suffers from dropsy. You tuck the fresh straw beneath his hips to lift him from the damp floor. He groans with relief as you adjust the padding. You offer him a cup of water and wipe his brow with a linen cloth. You pause to let the chill of the cloth soothe his fever. You step away quietly. You return to the dormitory to tend your own palate. The rush of morning chores has left you hollow. You strip the thin blanket aside and let the cool air hit your skin. You kneel and smooth the straw mattress. Each bolt of damp air feels like a blade. You smooth the single sheet and refold the blanket at the foot of the pallet. You feel the gravity of your vow settle in your chest like a stone. You leave the dormitory and find the novices in the kitchen yard. They kneel before a trough of cold water and scrub pots and ladles. You pick up a wooden spoon and join them. You scrape ash from the inside of a cauldron until the steel gleams. Your hands work without thought. Each stroke reminds you of the promise you made to live without complaint. You shoulder the scraped spoon and set it to dry. The noon sun climbs high and the air warms slightly. You join the brothers in silence on the open steps of the cloister. You cross your arms over your chest and press your hands against your shoulders. You close your eyes and let the warmth seep into your skin. You taste the memory of a feast from your childhood, the sweetness of fruit and honey. You swallow and remind yourself that sweetness is a luxury denied to you now. You rise and walk to the granary loft to fetch grain for the birds. You climb the ladder and step onto the dusty floor. You scoop handfuls of seed into a wicker basket. The grain spills through your fingers cold and hard. You descend and scatter the seed across the courtyard for the sparrows. They flock and peck at the kernels with cheerful chirps. You watch them with a faint smile. They share your hunger, but not your discipline. As afternoon wanes, you return to the scriptorium. The evening office awaits. You light candles and prepare your seat. You think of the bread you ate at dawn. You feel the emptiness return. Yet you rise to your task with steady resolve. The hours of copying and praying will carry you into the night. You will taste hunger sharper than steel. You will hold your vigil on an empty stomach. You will endure until the sun dips low once more and the fast is broken at sunset. And in that endurance you will find the fierce pride of a monk who has fasted and still remained steadfast. The candlelight flickers against the cold stone walls as you settle at your bench in the scriptorium. Your first task is complete. The parchment lies smooth before you, the ink well filled, and the quill trimmed to a fine point. Now begins the true test of your vow. You bend over the text. You must copy a passage from the Gospels that speaks of light shining in the darkness. You feel the irony keenly as you prepare to work through the night on an empty stomach. You dip your quill into the ink and let a single drop settle at the tip. You draw the nib across the parchment, forming the first letter with careful precision. Your hand trembles slightly from fatigue and hunger, but you steady your breath and press on. Each stroke must match the exemplar exactly. A single mistake could require scraping the ink away with a knife and starting over. You cannot afford a slip. For the first hour, you lose yourself in the rhythm of the script. The words flow from your hand in neat lines of black ink. You feel a quiet satisfaction at the crisp curves of each letter and the regular spacing between words. The lantern's glow warms your face as you lean forward. You taste the tang of iron from the ink on your tongue as you pause to wipe your brow. Soon your eyelids grow heavy and your back aches from bending over the bench. You stretch your arms above your head and clench your fingers. Your joints protest with each movement. You lower your arms and continue, reminding yourself that the brothers rely on these manuscripts for study and prayer. Each page you complete will guide countless souls toward wisdom and comfort. 2 hours pass before you dare to think of food. The memory of cold barley gruel lingers in your mind. You resist the urge to sneak to the refectory for a crust of bread. Instead, you focus on the text, letting the words carry you forward. A rival monk once told you that the heart of devotion lies in sacrifice. You recite that thought silently as you form the next letter. Your fingers grow stiff. The quill slips and you catch a blot of ink on the parchment. Panic flares as you reach for your knife. With a steady hand, you scrape away the blot, revealing clean parchment beneath. The momentary slip shakes your confidence, but you press on, determined to restore the page to perfection. The bell tolls for the night office. You pause in your work and rise slowly. You chant the familiar psalms in low tones, letting the words echo through the vaulted ceiling. Hunger rumbles in your belly like a distant drum. You bow your head and offer a silent prayer, that the fast will strengthen your spirit. You return to your bench without food or rest. The scriptorium is now empty, except for 2 of you. Your companion sits at a table across the room, copying a homily by St. Augustine. You imagine his quill scratching through the silence as you continue your own work. The candles burn lower and the night grows colder. You draw your cowl tighter and slip on the spare woolen stole you reserved for vigils. By midnight, you have filled 3 densely packed pages. Your wrist aches from the repetitive motion. You flex your hand and feel every tendon protest. You cradle the quill between finger and thumb, but the next letter feels blurred. You lean back and rub your temples. The shadows of the workshop seem to swirl around the stained glass window, distorting the image of the Virgin Mary. You dip your quill in ink again and force yourself to focus on a single word. You form each letter deliberately, slowing your pace until the tremor in your hand subsides. You taste feathers of sweat on your lip. Hunger claws at your stomach with renewed intensity. Your body demands nourishment, but your vow demands abstinence until the sun returns. At 2 a.m., the candle nearest you flares, and the wick snaps. You tilt the lantern to catch the last droplet of oil. You clutch the wooden bench and feel the rough grain bite your palm. You resist the urge to call for the cellar steward to fetch more oil. Instead, you move to the opposite table, where another candle still burns bright. You transfer your manuscript there and align your bench beside it. The flame's light is warmer, but the candles do not last forever. You lean in close to the parchment, so that every inch of the text is clear. You wipe a bead of sweat from your hand and continue copying. Each word you write is a small victory over the exhaustion that threatens to overwhelm you. As the night deepens, a faint noise comes from the cloister outside. The wind rattles shields in the armory and rattles your concentration. You raise your head and listen for a moment, then return to your work. A single page lies half complete before you. You must finish it before the candle dies. Your mouth is dry and your tongue feels thick. You press your finger to your lips and taste the dryness. You imagine breaking the vow for a single crumb of bread, then banish the thought. You remind yourself that the Lord's strength fills those who endure. You dip your quill in ink and trace the final letters with renewed determination. At 3:30, the final candle collapses into a pool of flame. You strike flint and steel against a chancel door to light a replacement. Sparks fly and ignite the wick. The candle sputters before catching, sending a column of smoke into the air. You set the lamp beside your bench and stir the flame to steady it. You rise with relief as you place the last stroke on the manuscript. The page is complete, and the text shines in crisp, clear lines. You bow your head in silent gratitude. The hunger in your gut has not diminished, but your spirit feels nourished by the work you have accomplished. You wipe ink from your fingers and fold the manuscript carefully. A single bell tolls in the distance, calling you back to the dormitory for the next office. You carry the completed pages in both hands. You step into the corridor and feel the weight of oil lamps and pennants on your shoulders. You chant the final verses of David's psalm as you walk, voice echoing through the empty hall. When you reach your cell, you place the pages on a shelf beside your sparse belongings. You kneel on the thin straw mattress and offer a final prayer of thanks for strength granted in weakness. Your hunger remains as keen as ever, but you find contentment in your sacrifice. You lie down wrapped in your habit and cowl, hands folded over your chest. The first grey light of dawn filters through the window slits. You emerge from your cell, ready to face another day of fasting, prayer, and service. You carry the memory of the night's toil in your muscles, and the knowledge that you have upheld your vow. Hunger will return with every hour, but so will the pride born of perseverance. You step into the cloister, quill and ink at your side, ready to continue the sacred task of copying God's word by candlelight. You slip into the scriptorium. As dusk settles over the monastery, the last light of day fading beyond the narrow windows. A single lantern burns atop your bench beside a tall candle whose wax drips onto a saucer of tin. You feel the wood smoke cling to your nostrils and taste the faint bitterness of soot with every breath. You draw the quill from its calamus and let its sharpened tip hover above a fresh sheet of vellum. Tonight's task is to copy an illuminated homily penned by one of the senior brothers. The script is dense Gothic lettering, ornate and precise. Each letter stands packed against its neighbor, leaving only a whisper of white space between lines. You adjust the position of your bench so that the candlelight falls evenly across your work surface. Shadows dance at the edges of each page as the wick sputters, and you lean in close, willing the flicker to hold steady. You dip the quill into the inkpot, tilting it just enough to catch a single drop. The ink stains your fingers in deep black swirls. You steady your hand, tuck your elbow against the bench, and begin to form the first letter, a slender I with delicate serifs. The quill catches on the vellum's surface, sending a small tremor through your wrist. You press harder, each stroke a test of patience and control. The letter emerges, imperfect but readable. You pause to wipe your hand on a scrap of parchment. As you continue, your eyes sting from the smoke and the strain. You blink slowly, forcing the tears back. You recall the novice's warning that candlelight weakens the eyes more than any fast. You grit your teeth and press on, drawing the next letter in the cramped line. Hours stretch, and the candle burns lower. Each flicker threatens to cast your work into darkness. You reach out and steady the flame, feeling the heat brush your fingertips. The scriptorium is filled with the soft scratch of quills and the creak of wooden benches. Around you, your brothers sit at their benches, copying psalms, commentaries, and gospel texts. Their robes hang heavy beneath the lamplight. You catch a glimpse of one brother's face beneath his cowl, his jaw clenched against exhaustion. You nod to him in silence, and he offers you a faint smile before returning to his script. Midway through the page, your stomach churns. Hunger has taken you since sunset. Your hands tremble slightly from weakness rather than fatigue alone. You swallow against the hollow ache. You remind yourself that the fast will end at dawn, and that this sacrifice is part of your devotion. You dip the quill again and press on, letter by letter, word by word. The text calls for an illuminated initial at the start of a paragraph. You set aside your quill and reach for a small box of pigments. The lid opens with a soft creak. Inside lie tiny pools of ground lapis and vermilion mixed with egg white. You dip a thin brush into the blue pigment and dot the vellum where the initial will rise. Your hand steadies as artistry takes precedence over script. You outline the ornate letter in red, fine strokes adding filigree at each corner. The pigment sets quickly under the heat of the candle. Once the illumination is complete, you return to the text. Each letter now begins beneath the painted initial, your script balancing the bright color above. You feel a surge of pride. Even in your hunger and weariness, you can create something of lasting beauty. The page comes alive beneath your hand, a testament to faith and perseverance. The candle flickers low again, and you carefully tilt the lantern to catch the melting wax before it pools. The air grows warmer and thicker with smoke. You inhale through your mouth to spare your lungs the worst of the soot. Your throat tightens and you cough softly, covering your mouth with a sleeve. You taste soot in the back of your throat. You rise slowly and stretch your arms, reaching overhead to crack the tension in your shoulders. You feel your joints pop in protest, but know the motion will ease the ache enough to continue. You step around the table and pour a cup of water from the basin nearby. You rinse your mouth, feeling the water wash away the grit. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve and return to your bench. The homily grows longer with each line you copy. Your wrist aches from holding the quill at an angle for so many hours. You massage your palm and let the pain dull to a throb. You pinch the bridge of your nose and rub until your vision clears. The room around you seems to sway with the candlelight. You steady yourself, bracing one hand on the table. Outside the window you see the first stroke of dawn paint the eastern sky in pale lavender. You know the fast will break with the morning office. Still you linger over the lines, determined to finish the final paragraph. Each word carries the weight of devotion and the promise of relief. At last, the last letter is formed. You set aside the quill and wipe the page with a dry cloth to lift any errant smudges. You lean back and admire your work. The page is neat, the letters uniform, the colors bright. You feel a surge of triumph. The task is complete, even as hunger and exhaustion press in around you. You close the manuscript gently and tie a strip of linen around it. You place it with care on a shelf where the senior scribe will collect it. You extinguish the candle by dipping the wick into the saucer, watching the flame die with a final flicker. You gather your cloak and hood and step into the corridor. Your footsteps echo as you make your way to the refectory for the dawn office. The relics of your labors remain in the silent scriptorium like silent witnesses. You feel the ache of your eyes and the sting of soot on your skin. Yet you carry with you the fierce pride that comes from dedicating your skill to the holy word. You join your brothers in prayer as the first light breaks and taste the promise of a simple meal ahead. You have copied manuscripts by candlelight, straining your eyes over cramped script and breathing in soot, and you have upheld your vow through darkness and hunger. In that sacrifice you find a strength beyond mere flesh, a testament that even the smallest spark of devotion can illuminate the longest night. The scriptorium lies hushed and dark when you return with your candle relit. Your next task is to fill the second page of the homily before the hour is past. You settle at your bench again, the vellum smooth beneath your fingertips. You dip the quill into the ink and test the flow on a scrap of parchment. It glides evenly. You take comfort that at least the tool remains true, even as your hand grows unsteady. You begin tracing the first line of the second page. Each letter must mirror the exemplar's curve and angle. You hold the quill almost vertical so that the ink does not pool. You press only lightly, feeling each ridge of the vellum beneath the nib. You form the slender arch of an A, and feel the tension leave your shoulders for a moment. Then you move to the next letter and taste the faint metallic tang of ink that lingers on your tongue. Your candle sputters, and you cough. Soot drifts from the wick and settles on your eyelashes. You wipe at your eyes with the back of a finger. The skin is slick with wax. You blink and find the script growing faint and blurred. You lean forward, squinting until the words resolve into form. Your eyes sting with each breath. You remember the novice's warning that too many nights of toil by candlelight will rob your sight. You swallow and press on. A sudden draft makes the candle flame flicker wildly. You cradle your hand around the lantern and step carefully to close the shutter. A sliver of moonlight falls across the bench. You steady the lantern and settle back into place. Your bench creaks beneath your weight. You straighten your back and feel every muscle protest. You let the warmth of the lantern chase away the chill at your waist. Hunger tugs at your ribs like a living thing. You dip into the text again. The homily speaks of charity and service. You feel as though the words leap from your page, mocking the emptiness in your belly. You form each letter with determination. You remind yourself that the work will outlast your hunger. Centuries hence, monks will read the text you copy and find solace in its message. You push the hunger from your mind and lean into the script. Halfway down the page, you slip. Your quill catches and smears a blob of ink across a letter. Panic rises as you stare at the blot. You draw a slow breath and reach for your knife. You steady the page on your palm and scrape away the blot carefully. You lift the fragment of ink from the vellum and blow the dust from your fingers. A pencil-thin groove now marks the parchment. You pause to consider whether to leave the trace or begin again. The other brothers wait for their own work. You press the knife into the groove and deepen it until the damaged area is flush. You wipe the surface with a scrap of linen. The repair is not perfect, but it will pass in candlelit readings. You lift your hands to rest your wrists. You stretch your fingers and shake them until you feel blood flow return. You set the knife and quill aside and flex each thumb. You taste a hint of warm breath as your hands warm in the lantern glow. You close your eyes and imagine a feast beyond the monastery walls. You imagine bread fresh from an oven, not soggy from boiled grain. You see chalices of wine that is more potent than watered barley. The mood lifts for a moment before hunger reminds you that these thoughts must remain only dreams. You open your eyes and pick up your quill again. You draw the next letter. Your hand finds its rhythm once more. Your eyes lock on the page as though your life depends on each stroke. You feel the hollow ache in your belly transform into focus. You hear the soft hiss of the candle flame and the quiet drip of wax onto the saucer. You let those sounds anchor you. Suddenly, you hear footsteps on the flagstones of the corridor. A brother appears in the doorway. He carries a small loaf wrapped in cloth. He hands it to you without a word. You recognize the abbot's gift of mercy passed in secret to those who toil late. You bow your head in gratitude. You unwrap the cloth and lift the bread to your lips. You break off a corner with trembling fingers. You taste the warmth of dough still soft inside. You chew slowly, letting each bite soften the sting of hunger. You nourish your body in small measure without shame. You return the cloth and loaf to the brother. He nods once and retreats into shadow. You turn the lantern so that the light catches the next lines of the manuscript. You dip your quill in ink again and copy the homily's closing sentence. Each letter stands proud and true beneath your careful hand. You trace the final word and lift your quill. You set it aside with a gentle tap. A low bell tolls through the monastery corridors. You rise and stretch. Your eyes feel heavy, vision blurred at the edges. You blow out the candle and watch the flame die. You extinguish the lantern in the saucer. You fold your parchment and tie it with ribbon. You carry the small bundle back to the shelf where finished work is stored. You step from the scriptorium into the cloister. The night air is cold and clear. You breathe deeply, tasting the promise of dawn. You walk the empty courtyard, heels echoing on stone. You pause beside the fountain and cross yourself. Moonlight glimmers on the water's surface. You feel your hunger recede, replaced by gratitude for this small gift of bread. You make your way to the dormitory. Fatigue tugs at your limbs, but you smile at the thought of rising before dawn once more. You kneel at your pallet and offer a short prayer of thanks. You whisper words of humility and serve. You taste the echo of the homily's message in your soul. You lie on rough straw and pull the thin blanket over your shoulders. Hunger will return with the morning, you know. Yet you rest assured that the vow you keep and the work you perform by candlelight carry a deeper purpose. You close your eyes and drift between sleep and prayer. The world outside your cell remains still and silent, waiting for the first bell. And in that stillness you find the fierce pride of a monk who has labored through the night, eyes strained and lungs tinged with soot, to carry light into darkness. You rise before sunrise, and pull on your wool tunic and coarse hose. The air bites at your face as you step onto frozen earth. In the field beyond the wall, a pile of stones awaits your labor. Each boulder is hewn roughly by the quarry and cold to the touch. You bend at the waist and curl your fingers around the smallest stone you can lift. Even this handful weighs more than any loaf of bread you have eaten in weeks. You lift it to your shoulder and carry it toward the rising wall. Your breath clouds in front of you. At the wall you kneel on frost-hardened soil and brace your back against a lower layer of stones. You set the stone in place with a grunt and level it with a piece of wood carved into a makeshift mallet. The vibrations travel through your arms and settle into your bones. You steady the rock until it sits flush with its neighbors. Then you stand and stagger back toward the pile. Your legs shake beneath you. You pull another stone free of the heap and repeat the motion. By mid-morning, the sun has yanked the frost from the ground. The earth gives beneath your boots like a sponge. You turn to the plow lying in the stubble of last season. Its wooden beam is rough and icy. You slip an iron share into your harness and leash the oxen beneath you. The animals snort steam into the cold air. You grip the beam with both hands and lean forward until the share bites into the soil. The earth resists at first and then cracks open with a low rumble. You urge the oxen onward with a soft hiss and a tug of the reins. They pull the plow through the half-frozen field. Soil flakes turn over in clods of clay and roots. You strain to guide the plow in a straight furrow. The beam jabs into your hip each time the share hits a stone. Sweat beads at your temples despite the chill. Your shirt sticks to your flesh. You press on until the furrow stretches a full length toward the barn. When you finish one pass, you wipe your hands on your tunic and turn for the next. You drive the oxen through the turning for a second furrow and then a third. Each length tests your strength and your will. By noon, the field looks like a patchwork of trenches. You step back to survey your work. Your shoulders ache and a sharp twinge runs down your spine. You swallow and press your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Hunger twists in your stomach. You drop the reins and walk to the barn for water. You draw a pail from the well and return to the field. You pour water into your cupped hands and lift it to your lips. The water is cold but sweet against your tongue. You gulp it down and let the chill chase through your veins. You stand still for a moment, catching your breath before you harness the oxen again. The afternoon sun warms the field enough to melt the frost on your gloves. Yet the wind picks up and drags the chill back into your bones. You gather more stones for the wall by the road. These stones must hold back the floodwaters when spring comes. You heft a pair of stones in each hand and stagger toward the low barrier. You fit the stones into the mortared gaps you laid earlier in the day. Kneeling on the cold mud, you pack clay between each stone to seal the gap. You press with both thumbs until the clay oozes into every crack. You smooth the surface with your forearm. The clay stiffens almost instantly in the cold air. You rise and haul more stones. Your hands are numb, and your breath bleeds in ragged puffs. By late afternoon, your body trembles from the cold and the toil. You cast a glance at the chapel steeple in the distance, and offer a silent prayer for strength to complete this labor. You drop the last stone into place, and stand back to admire the wall's new height. The stones gleam in the dying light, each one set by your frostbitten hands. You retrieve your tools and lead the oxen back to the barn. You unhitch the yoke and push the plow against the stable wall. Your fingers fumble at the ropes. You wipe cold sweat from your brow. You pull off your gloves and rub your hands until the color returns. Your fingers crack and split, skin peeled away by the frigid labor. As dusk falls, you return to the cloister through fields that smell of turned earth and moss. You welcome the warmth that gathers in your chest as you cross into the courtyard. You wash the day's grime from your hands and face, feeling the last of the cold drain away. You wrap your cloak about your shoulders. In the refectory, you kneel at the table while the brothers chant the evening office. Hunger still ache in your gut, but it dims beneath the echo of psalms. You rise for the final meal, a bowl of thin gruel and a scrap of bread. You taste grain warm from cooking fire. You swallow slowly, honoring each mouthful. You return to your pallet and lay down on the rough straw. Your muscles throb from hauling stones and guiding plows. Your back screams under the weight of each load. Yet you rest with pride that you have built walls and broken ground with your own hands. Dawn will come again, and you will rise to face the fields once more. You will endure the frost and the hunger because this work is your service. In that service you find a strength deeper than any stone you have set. You wake before dawn into a world still draped in darkness and frost. The field beyond the wall lies empty now, the stones you set yesterday cold beneath a dusting of new snow. You pull on your tunic and hose and tie the rope at your waist tight. You grip the handle of a long wooden shovel and step outside into the yard, where the stable boy waits with a wheelbarrow half full of broken rocks. No word is spoken between you. The vow of silence stands even here at the break of day. You bend and scoop a shovel full of gravel and broken stone into the wheelbarrow. Your shoulders strain with the weight as you lift and level the load. With a grunt, you haul the barrow toward the outer wall, where an earthen ramp must be reinforced before the spring rains. Each step is heavy in the soft ground. You steer the barrow along a narrow plank laid over the mud to keep the load from sinking. You pause when the wheel catches on a knot of wood. You lift the wheel free and set it right before wheeling on. By mid-morning, the ramp is half buried beneath gravel and grit. You drop the wheelbarrow and switch to a sturdy hoe. You chop at the frozen earth, turning soil to prepare a small vegetable plot for the infirmary. Each stroke shears through a crust of ice and jolts through your arms. You bend and rise, sweat matting your hair despite the cold. Roots and stones tangle in the furrows. You pry the larger stones free and toss them aside, feeling the ache in your lower back deepen. When you finish one row, you turn the soil with a rake, smoothing the surface for planting. You walk the length of the plot, pushing and pulling the tines until the ground lies level. Your hands clutch the wooden handle as though it were a lifeline. You step back and admire the neat trench. You know that within weeks it will yield vegetables to keep the sick warm. You nod to the sun climbing higher into the pale sky. Your next task lies by the orchard wall. A new fence must be erected to keep the pigs from rooting up the newly sown clover. You gather oak posts from a nearby stack and carry them one by one to the line where they will stand. Each post weighs nearly as much as a man's chest. You lift it onto your shoulder and balance for a step before you set it in place. You sink a post hole with a heavy iron bar, hammering the oak deep into the earth. Clods of frozen soil fly at each impact. Dirt and dust cover your tunic by the time the post stands firm. You repeat the process for each spacing. By midday, you have set 10 posts, their tops gleaming with fresh cuts. You pause to rest at the barn door. Your breath hisses in the air. You tug off your gloves and rub your palms, feeling skin crack beneath the wool. You hold them beneath the small hearth fire to warm your fingertips. The cook ladles a shallow bowl of broth and bread into your hands. You swallow a piece of bread and sip the hot liquid. The broth is thin but rich with onion and root vegetable. You taste the warmth spread through your chest and squeeze the bowl until the heat bleeds into your hands. Reheated, you return to the orchard fence. You stretch a length of wire between each post. You press it into the metal staples driven by the squire earlier. Your fingers grow numb as you twist and secure each strand. The wire must be taut to hold back the swine. You loop the remaining wire into coils and climb inside the orchard, feeding it through the staples one loop at a time. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow. The orchard smells of cold earth and sprouting buds waiting for spring. Next you fetch the largest stone from the pile by the barn. This one will serve as a corner marker for the next wall you will build. You push the shovel beneath it and lift with all your might. The stone slips free with a grunt. You heave it onto a small wooden sled you crafted for this purpose. You drag the sled through the orchard gate to the far corner of the field. The path is rough, and the sled's runners scrape over clods of earth. You walk beside it, grasping the ropes, looped through the handles, and forcing it onward until it reaches its resting place. By afternoon, the sun has broken through to warm your back, yet the wind returns to nip at your ears and bite at exposed skin. You bend to level the cornerstone with a mallet and chisel. You tap until the stone sinks into perfect alignment with the others. You step back and admire the square corner of the new field wall. It stands low but true, ready for more stones under your hand. You leave the tools by the base of the wall and hurry back to the barn for the final task of the day. You strap on your harness and head for the small herd of sheep that graze in the lower meadow. You lift the heavy feed bag and pour grain into the trough. The sheep jostle each other for the few handfuls. You sip water from your flask and pat the nearest ram's fleece where it swirls in thick curls. The animal nuzzles your hand in thanks. As evening approaches, you return through the orchard and fields toward the cloister gates. Your bones ache in every joint. Your hands are speckled with dirt and small cuts. You reach the gate and stop for a moment, looking out at the stretch of fields you have shaped with sweat and stone. You feel the quiet pride of creation, the knowledge that your labor will nourish and protect your brothers in the days to come. You enter the cloister courtyard just as the tolling bell summons the evening meal. You wipe your hands on your habit and cross yourself at the fountain. You pass beneath the arches with bent back and heavy steps. You kneel at the refectory table as your brothers recite the prayer of thanksgiving. You bow your head in silence. The cook serves bowls of stew and bread. You taste the meat and vegetables that you helped plant and protect. You savor each bite as though it were the first food you have ever known. You feel warmth return to your belly and spread to your arms and legs. You swallow slowly, grateful that your back-breaking labor has ended for the day. When the meal is done, you wash your bowl and cup before returning to the dormitory. You kneel at your pallet and offer a prayer of thanks. You whisper words for strength in the tasks to come. You slide beneath the thin blanket and close your eyes. Your body aches like a man who has carried the world on his shoulders. Yet you rest with the fierce pride of a monk who has hauled stones, plowed soil, and built walls with frostbitten hands. Tomorrow you will rise again to face field and frost. But for now, you sleep with the knowledge that your labor serves a purpose greater than yourself. Your next task lies by the orchard wall. A new fence must be erected to keep the pigs from rooting up the newly sown clover. You gather oak posts from a nearby stack and carry them one by one to the line where they will stand. Each post weighs nearly as much as a man's chest. You lift it onto your shoulder and balance for a step before you set it in place. You sink a post hole with a heavy iron bar, hammering the oak deep into the earth. Clods of frozen soil fly at each impact. Dirt and dust cover your tunic by the time the post stands firm. You repeat the process for each spacing. By midday, you have set 10 posts, their tops gleaming with fresh cuts. You pause to rest at the barn door. Your breath hisses in the air. You tug off your gloves and rub your palms, feeling skin crack beneath the wool. You hold them beneath the small hearth fire to warm your fingertips. The cook ladles a shallow bowl of broth and bread into your hands. You swallow a piece of bread and sip the hot liquid. The broth is thin but rich with onion and root vegetable. You taste the warmth spread through your chest and squeeze the bowl until the heat bleeds into your hands. Reheated, you return to the orchard fence. You stretch a length of wire between each post. You press it into the metal staples driven by the squire earlier. Your fingers grow numb as you twist and secure each strand. The wire must be taut to hold back the swine. You loop the remaining wire into coils and climb inside the orchard, feeding it through the staples one loop at a time. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow. The orchard smells of cold earth and sprouting buds waiting for spring. Next, you fetch the largest stone from the pile by the barn. This one will serve as a corner marker for the next wall you will build. You push the shovel beneath it and lift with all your might. The stone slips free with a grunt. You heave it onto a small wooden sled you crafted for this purpose. You drag the sled through the orchard gate to the far corner of the field. The path is rough, and the sled's runners scrape over clods of earth. You walk beside it, grasping the ropes looped through the handles and forcing it onward until it reaches its resting place. By afternoon, the sun has broken through to warm your back. Yet the wind returns to nip at your ears and bite at exposed skin. You bend to level the cornerstone with a mallet and chisel. You tap until the stone sinks into perfect alignment with the others. You step back and admire the square corner of the new field wall. It stands low but true, ready for more stones under your hand. You leave the tools by the base of the wall and hurry back to the barn for the final task of the day. You strap on your harness and head for the small herd of sheep that graze in the lower meadow. You lift the heavy feed bag and pour grain into the trough. The sheep jostle each other for the few handfuls. You sip water from your flask and pat the nearest ram's fleece where it swirls in thick curls. The animal nuzzles your hand in thanks. As evening approaches, you return through the orchard and fields toward the cloister gates. Your bones ache in every joint. Your hands are speckled with dirt and small cuts. You reach the gate and stop for a moment, looking out at the stretch of fields you have shaped with sweat and stone. You feel the quiet pride of creation, the knowledge that your labor will nourish and protect your brothers in the days to come. You enter the cloister courtyard just as the tolling bell summons the evening meal. You wipe your hands on your habit and cross yourself at the fountain. You pass beneath the arches with bent back and heavy steps. You kneel at the refectory table as your brothers recite the prayer of thanksgiving. You bow your head in silence. The cook serves bowls of stew and bread. You taste the meat and vegetables that you helped plant and protect. You savor each bite as though it were the first food you have ever known. You feel warmth return to your belly and spread to your arms and legs. You swallow slowly, grateful that your back-breaking labor has ended for the day. When the meal is done, you wash your bowl and cup before returning to the dormitory. You kneel at your pallet and offer a prayer of thanks. You whisper words for strength in the tasks to come. You slide beneath the thin blanket and close your eyes. Your body aches like a man who has carried the world on his shoulders. Yet you rest with the fierce pride of a monk who has hauled stones, plowed soil, and built walls with frost-bitten hands. Tomorrow you will rise again to face field and frost. But for now you sleep with the knowledge that your labor serves a purpose greater than yourself. You rise before dawn into a world of hushed stone corridors and empty courtyards. The day ahead will demand nothing but silence and careful attention to every movement. You slip into your habit without a sound and step into the cloister, where the arches stretch in unbroken lines around a pale garden. No bird sings, no brother speaks. Only the soft echo of your footsteps follows you as you move through the grey light. Your first duty is to attend the chapter house for morning prayer. You enter behind your brothers and find your usual place among them. Each monk kneels on the cold stone floor, backs straight, heads bowed. You join in the chant without emotion, your voice blending into the chorus. The words wash over you like water, neither rising nor falling, constant and unbroken. You feel the weight of expectation settle on your shoulders. Every note must be true, every movement precise. There is no room for error. After the office, you retreat to the scriptorium to offer silence and solitude to the work of copying manuscripts. You open the door in quiet reverence. Light from a single lantern pools on a wooden bench. You set your page before you and dip the pen into inkwell. Your nib meets the vellum with a whisper. The script you trace must be perfect, each letter formed with utmost care. A crooked stroke could ruin the page and bring shame. You hold your breath and form the first letter of the line, letting your mind empty of all but the motion of quill on skin. The hours pass in this silent vigil. Outside the window, the sun climbs slowly, casting pale beams through narrow panes. You do not look up until the page is complete. Only then do you lean back and rub your temples. Your neck aches from bending forward without rest. You rise and stretch, reminding yourself that silence can be a burden heavier than any stone. Next, you join the lay brothers in the kitchen. No words are spoken as you gather around the fire to bake the daily bread. You measure flour by sight and weight it with practiced hands. You stir the dough in a single motion, feeling its texture shift beneath your palms. You shape each loaf without a word of praise or complaint. The only sound is the crackle of coals and the soft brush of cloth against cloth. With the bread in the oven, you move to the refectory. The tables lie cleansed from yesterday's meal. You arrange benches and bowls with silent precision. You light a single candle in the center of the table. Its flame trembles in the still air. You step back and admire the order and quiet. No voice disturbs the peace of this room. You feel the pressure of perfection pressing in on you from every side. At midday, you kneel for the office of midday prayer. Again, you join in the psalms that speak of trust and devotion. You pray in silence afterward, listening only to the soft rustle of your robe as you stand. Your thoughts drift to the world outside the monastery walls, where voices rise in laughter and argument. Here you carry only the hush of cloistered life and the expectation that nothing will ever break its quiet. After prayer, you return to work in the garden. You kneel at a row of tender shoots and weed around each plant. You pull the unwanted grasses with gentle care. Each weed must be removed at its root without breaking the soil around it. You leave no footprint beyond your careful rows. You fetch water in silence and pour it at the base of each plant. The drip of water on earth is loud in the stillness. You pause to watch the droplets sink into the soil before you move on. The afternoon finds you in the infirmary wing. A sick brother lies wrapped in blankets. You carry a bowl of broth to his bed. You set it down on a small table and adjust the covers at his shoulders. He does not speak. He watches you with weary eyes. You stand by his bedside until he drinks the broth. You press his hand briefly to offer strength, then leave without a word. The doorway swallows your form, and you return to the cloister's hush. The final task of the day is to tend the stable. The horses wait in their stalls, hooves clattering on the stone floor. You clean each stall in silence, shoveling away the straw bedding and replacing it with fresh bundles. Each horse nuzzles your hand as you work. You whisper a silent prayer for them, but no sound leaves your lips. You close the stall door gently and move to the next. As dusk falls, you gather again in the chapel for evening prayer. Candles line the altar, their flames steady in the gloom. You kneel and chant the psalms of thanksgiving. Your voice rings out in the still air, a single thread in a tapestry of quiet devotion. The words carry little warmth in your heart, but you offer them with conviction. When the office ends, you step into the cloister one last time. The night sky above is clear, stars sharp against the dark. A cool breeze sweeps across the courtyard and rustles your robe. You lift your cowl and taste the night air on your tongue. You close your eyes and savor a moment of solitude that surpasses silence. Here you stand alone with your thoughts and the pressure of perfection that never fades. You return to your cell and kneel by your pallet. You do not speak a final prayer. You let the quiet fill you as you fold your hands. The day has been long and flawless. Every movement has met the silent standard set by generations of brothers before you. Yet the stillness feels like a trial by itself, testing your resolve more than any physical labor. You lie down on the straw mattress and draw the thin blanket around your shoulders. You feel the hush of the cloister closing in, like a stone shell around your senses. Sleep comes at last, heavy and deep. You dream of voices you will not hear, and laughter that will not echo here. You dream of a world where silence yields to sound, and perfection bends to mercy. Yet you know that when dawn breaks, you will rise again into unbroken quiet, carrying the burden of expectation with every breath. In that burden you find a strange comfort, a reminder that your devotion stands firm even when words fail and the world lies silent around you. You awaken to the dull toll of the discipline bell echoing through the corridors. Your heart pounds with dread because today you face the abbot and your hidden sins must be laid bare. You wrap the thin cloak around your shoulders and follow the silent procession of brothers toward the chapter house. Each step feels heavier than the last. You can taste shame on your tongue, a bitter flavor that has haunted you since your transgression. Inside the chapter house, you kneel before the abbot's seat of carved oak. His expression is grave as he looks upon you. A narrow shaft of light falls across the floorboards, illuminating the dust motes that drift in silence. You bow your head and cross yourself, palms pressed together in supplication. The abbot clears his throat. You feel the weight of every promise you have broken pressing on your chest. Your throat tightens and you swallow. "Brother," the abbot intones, "you have confessed to neglecting your prayers, spilling ink upon sacred text, and harboring secret doubts about your vocation. Do you stand before this community in repentance?" His voice carries no anger, only sorrow for the wayward. You lift your eyes and meet his gaze. You force the words from your lips. "I stand guilty and seek mercy." Your voice cracks at the end. You bow deeper. The abbot nods and gestures to the monk at his side. You rise unsteadily and allow your hands to be bound with soft cord. The cord will guide you to the place of penance. Your knees shake as you follow the brother who leads you out of the chapter house. The corridors loom tall and empty. Shadows cling beneath arches and behind columns. Your footsteps echo like the toll of a distant bell. You emerge into the courtyard, where a rough wooden post stands beneath the wall. A small group of brothers forms a circle around you. Their faces are solemn. None speak. You kneel before the post. The monk with the cord secures your wrists to a peg at shoulder height. You hear the click of the knot and the rustle of cloth as the abbot steps forward. He holds a scourge of knotted ropes in his hand. Your breath catches. The abbot lifts the scourge and flicks it once against his palm. You close your eyes and steel yourself. The first lash falls across your back with a crack that makes your flesh shiver. Pain blooms like wildfire across your shoulders. You grit your teeth and bite back a cry. The second lash follows without pause. You count the strokes in your mind, each one a reminder of your failure to obey the rule. You welcome the fire of pain because it drives the guilt from your soul. When at last the scourging ends, you slump against the post. The cord chafes at your wrists. Your back burns with angry welts. Yet, you feel a curious relief. The shame that weighed your heart has been driven out in blood and sorrow. You bow your head and whisper a prayer of thanks for the discipline that guides you back to the narrow path of virtue. After the scourging, you are led to the aisle beside the cloister. There, a straw mattress lies on the cold stone floor. You kneel upon it until your knees numb. You recall the vow to stand vigil in prayer without shelter. Today, you accept this penance because you have failed the vows of obedience and purity. Your back throbs with every breath. You brace yourself and let your mind empty of every thought but the words of the psalms you must recite. The abbot's voice calls the first lesson. You chant the psalm of repentance with trembling voice. Each verse rings in the silent cloister. You feel the stones beneath you, cold and unyielding, like the truth you must embrace. You pray for forgiveness with every word. By the time the psalm ends, your voice is hoarse and your spirit sore. You bow your head once more. When your penance of stones is complete, you are granted a moment's rest. A brother leads you to the infirmary where water and a single slice of bread await. You kneel and eat in silence. The meager meal tastes like mercy. You swallow slowly and let the warmth spread through your body. You taste gratitude for the promise of forgiveness carried in that small crumb. Your final act of penance is the ritual confession. You return to the chapter house and kneel once more before the abbot. You have learned to speak your faults without shame. You recount each secret thought that betrayed your vows. You name the moments of fear, the fleeting doubts about your calling. You speak of the envy you harbored when others praised your work. You lay bare every hidden fault, as though each were a stone tied to your heart. You speak until your voice fails and tears fill your eyes. The abbot listens without judgment. His eyes shine with compassion. When you finish, he places a hand on your head and pronounces absolution. May the Lord forgive you and strengthen you to walk in his light. You feel the current burst of relief wash through you. The shame remains in your flesh, but your soul feels cleansed. The vow of silence may continue, but in your heart you carry a silent joy. You rise unbound and leave the chapter house. A brother drapes a new habit over your shoulders. This habit has not borne your sin. It is fresh and clean. You pull it on and fasten the rope at your waist. You stand taller beneath the cloak that bears no stain of shame. You walk through the corridors with cautious steps, the penance complete, your spirit renewed. Back in the cloister, you find work waiting. You must sweep the walkways before the next office. You pick up the straw broom and brush away dust and leaves. Each sweep carries away the last crumbs of guilt. You move in quiet reverence through the silent arches. You feel the pressure of perfection lift in gentle waves. You have faced the lash and uttered confession. You have borne the ritual penance for every misstep and secret thought. You know your path remains narrow, but you move forward with renewed faith and humility. You wake before dawn and gather with fellow pilgrims at the great gate. The sky is grey and the air feels damp in your lungs. You shoulder your small pack and step onto the muddy road that winds away from the town walls. Each footstep sinks into frozen ruts filled with slush. Your boots squelch as you march, your cloak heavy with moisture. You swallow against the cold and press on, driven by the promise of holy grace at your destination. By mid-morning, the procession stretches into a line of weary souls. You pass peasants walking barefoot, clergy bearing heavy relics, merchants hawking bread and ale at the roadside. The mud splatters your robes up to your knees and soaks through your hose. You feel the chill settle in your bones with each step. Your back aches under the weight of your pack. You remind yourself that hardships of the body pale next to the salvation you seek. A sudden rain begins, cold and insistent. You pull your hood over your head and press onward. The rain soaks into the ground, turning the path into a river of muck. You follow the pilgrim ahead of you as he slips on a patch of mud and falls hard on his knee. You catch his arm and help him up. His face is pale with fever. You press your cloak against his back and urge him onward, knowing that to stop is to risk death by exposure or worse. By midday, you reach a small shrine beside the road. A cluster of pilgrims kneels in prayer before a crude wooden statue of the Virgin. You wash your hands in a stone basin fed by a tiny spring. The water is cold and tastes of moss. You cup the water and splash it over your face. The chill snaps you awake. You recite a quick prayer and leave a piece of bread at the statue's base. You eat your own crust, tasting dust and grain, and swallow with relief. As you rise, you notice several pilgrims clutching their sides, sweating despite the cold. A haze hangs over them, and they lean on wooden staves for support. You recall stories of plague carried by travelers in these parts. You glance down the road and see a cloaked figure stumbling toward you. She bears the red cross of the leper hospital. You step aside and let her pass. You feel a knot of fear in your throat. The road climbs a gentle hill, and you pause to catch your breath. Your legs tremble, and you lean on your staff. You look back at the line of mud-brown pilgrims winding into the distance. Your heart pounds in your chest. You tighten your cloak and wipe rain from your brow. Ahead, you see a faded sign marking the way to the next town. You press on toward it, each step an act of resolve. By late afternoon, you reach the town gates. Guards inspect your belongings, searching for weapons or contraband. You bow your head and show no sign of fear. They glance at your mud-spattered robes and wave you through. You enter a narrow street lined with half-timbered houses. A pungent smell of animal stalls and refuse drifts through the mist. You follow the sign to the Pilgrim Hostel. Inside the hostel, you find a crowded hall lit by low candles. Pilgrims lie on straw mattresses 3 deep in each corner. The air is warm but heavy with the smell of sweat and sickness. A lay brother hands you a bowl of thin gruel and a coarse loaf. You swallow gratefully, tasting warmth for the first time in hours. You bow your head and offer thanks in silence. You find a space on the floor beside a fevered man who coughs in nightmarish gasps. His skin gleams with sweat. He wavers as he sits up. You hand him your water flask, and he drinks deeply. You place your hand on his shoulder. He offers you a weak smile. You pray that he recovers overnight. That night the wind rattles shutters, and rain pounds the roof. You lie on the hard floor wrapped in your cloak. Your stomach roils from the gruel. You wrestle with the ache in your knees and the hunger in your gut. You recall the journey still ahead. Weeks of travel through heath and forest, climbing rocky paths toward a distant shrine. You press your lips together and vow to endure whatever trials come next. At first light you rise with the pilgrims who stumble from their pallets. You share a meager breakfast of stale bread and watered wine. You perform your morning prayers in the chapel beside the hostel. You breathe in the incense and feel momentarily renewed. You step outside into a cold grey dawn and resume the road. The march continues through fields, sodden with rain. You ford a swollen stream, water rushing around your calves and chilling your feet. You grip your staff and bend your knees against the current. You taste mud in the water and grit at the bottom of your boots. You reach the far bank and stand dripping, heart pounding with relief. By noon you climb a steep ridge. The path narrows and rock protrudes through the soil. You haul yourself upward, pausing to wipe sweat from your brow. The wind bites your face, and you tuck your cloaked head down. You see the plain spread out below you, fields and villages shrinking into a patchwork far beneath. You feel small and humbled by the vastness of creation. At the top of the ridge you collapse against a boulder. Your lungs ache and your back screams. You close your eyes and let the wind rush against you. You taste freedom in the cold air and sorrow in your exhaustion. You rise and follow the path downward, each step measured to spare your shaking legs. As afternoon wanes, you pass a band of soldiers marching in the opposite direction. They wear chainmail and carry long spears. You wonder where they have been and what battles waiting ahead. They pass you without a glance. You feel the gulf between soldier and pilgrim. They march toward war, you toward peace. Yet both of you face hardships that test the spirit. By evening, you reach another pilgrim hostel. You repeat the rituals of lodging, wash your face, share a bowl of gruel, find a corner to rest. You whisper prayers for the sick and the lost. You steel yourself for the journey tomorrow. Your feet bleed and your hands bear blisters. You feel fever in your bones, but you will not relent. You will continue on this road of hardship and sickness, enduring mud and danger for the promise of holy reward. You lie on your straw pallet and stare at the darkness above. You whisper a vow to carry onward. You know the pilgrimage will break you in body and spirit, yet you also know that this sacrifice will bind you to something greater than yourself. You close your eyes and let weariness claim you. You have marched through mud and rain, faced fevered companions, passed guards and soldiers, climbed ridges of sorrow and hope. You will rise again at dawn and press on toward the distant shrine. where you will lay your burdens at the feet of the divine. In that journey you find both hardship and grace. You enter the library just as dusk settles over the cloister. The heavy wooden doors swing shut behind you with a hollow thud. Inside, rows of shelves stretch toward the vaulted ceiling, each shelf laden with leather-bound volumes that smell of dust and parchment. Lanterns hang from iron hooks, their flames trembling in the drafts that swirl through the narrow windows. You cross the marble floor to a polished oak desk and set your manuscript before you. Your quill rests in a pewter inkwell, and a sheaf of fresh vellum lies within reach. By the time the first candle gutter flutters, you have already copied 3 lines of text. The letters must match their exemplar exactly, each curve and serif reflecting the scribe's skill. You steady your wrist and lean over the desk. The lantern light casts long shadows across the page and makes the letters glow faintly. You press your fingertips into the surface of the vellum and begin to trace the next sentence. Your eyes narrow as you force them to follow the fine script. An hour passes. The candle sputters, then flares. You reach up and tilt the lantern so that its light falls squarely on the page. The wick throws sparks of soot that drift down onto the desk. You brush them away and continue. Your wrist creaks with each stroke of the quill. Pain radiates from your forearm up into your elbow. You flex your hand and feel the tendons pop beneath the skin. You push through the ache because the work must be finished by midnight. By candle 3, you have filled a page and turned it over. You begin the second. Your neck aches from the constant tilt of your head. You rotate it carefully to ease the stiffness. You swallow and taste the bitterness of the ink on your tongue. You wonder if the ancient monks who first wrote these words felt the same torment. But they had no choice. Their work preserved the wisdom of ages, and your work now preserves it for this generation. Outside the window the moon rises, faint and pale. You glance up and see its reflection in the polished marble floor. You catch a glimpse of your tired face in the glass. Dark circles ring your eyes. Your hair is mussed from running your fingers through it. You bow your head and return to the text. You copy until a word falters at the tip of your quill. You trace it again and again until it sits perfect. A single mistake could spoil the entire page. The shepherd's bell in the courtyard rings once for 3rd hour. You do not move. The library is your cathedral now. You serve your brothers by copying texts that will guide their prayers and their learning. You lean forward and trace each letter by memory as much as by sight. The flickering lantern makes the edges of the letters dance. You force yourself to see the details through blurred vision. You grip the edge of the desk with your left hand and push on. By the time the lantern wicks burn low again, you have completed 3 pages. Your wrist trembles so badly you nearly drop the quill. You set it down and massage your palm, feeling the warmth of your blood return. Then you refocus on the vellum. A single spine of a codex lies beside you, and you recall the weight of the leather covers. You press your fingertips into the grooves on your desk and draw strength from the wood. You pick the quill up again. Midnight comes, and the library door creaks open. A solitary figure slips inside and refills your lantern with oil. You nod in wordless thanks. The flicker returns to the flame, and you watch it dance. You dip your quill and begin again. You copy a homily on patience and perseverance. Each word rings in your mind as you form it on the page. You imagine the words carried to distant cloisters in wagons and ships guiding other weary scribes. By the time the 4th lantern gutter dies, you have filled 5 pages. Your neck is locked in place, and your wrist throbs with every motion. You lift your hand to your nape and feel the knots of tension there. You flex your fingers and swipe away dew-like beads of sweat that have formed on your brow. You close one eye and read the next line of text. You will not stop until the task is done. A bell tolls the final hour. You bow your head in prayer of thanks and lay your quill across the page. You stretch your arms overhead and let your back crack in relief. Your limbs protest each movement, but you rise and step away from the desk. You carry the completed pages to a shelf where a brother will bind them into a volume. You pause and breathe in the scent of ink and wax. You leave the library as dawn's first light slips through the cloister arch. Your body aches in every joint. Your eyes sting with tears. Yet in your heart you hold a fierce pride. You have labored through the night under flickering lamps, copying sacred texts with wrists cramped and neck stiff. Your service ensures that the words of the past will live on. And in that service you find a purpose greater than your own pain. You awake to the deep toll of bells summoning you to vespers on a feast day. Today marks the anniversary of the monastery's founding, and the air hums with rare excitement. Brothers move more briskly through the cloister, robes sweeping the stone floor in whispered rustles. You join the procession into the chapel where candles burn brighter and colored banners hang from the walls. After Vespers, the refectory fills with a hush of anticipation. A table at the head is laden with sweetmeats and fresh bread brought from the town's market. A single roast bird sits in the center, its skin crisp and golden. You kneel among your brothers, voices raised in a single hymn of thanksgiving. Your heart lifts at the smell of spiced wine and honeyed cakes. But beneath the surface of celebration lies an undercurrent of suspicion. Some monks murmur that this feast day has brought misfortune in past years. They cast furtive glances at each newcomer or lay visitor. A spill of wine is blamed on a jealous brother's curse. A tray of pastries vanishes beneath the table, and tongues wag of theft in the night. The prior pauses before each portion, his eyes sharp, as though ready to accuse the slightest misstep. You taste the sweet bread and lift your cup of spiced wine. The flavor warms your chest, yet you feel uneasy under the watchful eyes of the cellarer who tallies every cup poured. He scribbles on a parchment roll as you drink, counting your sips and marking each crumb you take. You swallow slowly, mindful of the strict allowance. You wonder if indulgence today will be counted against you tomorrow. A young novice steps forward to serve a second round of cakes. He trembles as he fills each bowl. You see his jaw tighten when an older brother's cloak brushes him. Superstition has deemed anyone who wears red unworthy of celebration. The red cloak of the infirmarian draws glares as he carries stew to the tables. Rumors say he practices forbidden remedies. You feel a pang of sympathy and duck your eyes. As the feast winds down, the abbot stands and calls for silence. He speaks of charity and gratitude, and warns against envy that poisons the spirit. His voice echoes off the stone walls. You sense his words carry special weight today, as he examines each face in the hall. You bow your head in reverence. You feel the weight of his scrutiny like a cold hand on your shoulder. After the meal, the brothers file out with bowls scraped clean and empty cups. You step into the courtyard where torches burn in iron sconces. The feast day ends with a single hymn echoed beneath the moon. You feel the lingering sweetness of celebration and the sharper sting of suspicion in equal measure. You cross yourself and whisper a final prayer that next year's feast may bring only peace and fellowship unmarred by fear or envy. You rise before first light into a world of stone and shadow, your body shivering in a habit that offers little warmth. The cold cuts through every layer of wool until your skin feels raw and aching. You trudge across flagstones slick with frost, each footfall reminding you that heat belongs to another realm. By the time you reach the chapel, you already bear the weight of day-long deprivation on your shoulders. In the refectory, you kneel on cold stone and receive a single crust of barley bread and a draught of water. The bread crumbles in your mouth and tastes of dust more than grain. Your stomach twists in protest, a hollow ache that will not relent until evening. You swallow the water in small sips, each one a reminder that thirst has sharpened your senses into a knife's edge. You leave the hall and cross the cloister to the herb garden, where frost grips the plants in icy claws. Your fingers, numb from exposure, fumble as you prune away dead shoots. Every pull sends a jolt of pain up your arm. You collect handfuls of herbs for the infirmary, while your own body craves the warmth these plants will never bring to you. By mid-morning, you find yourself in the kitchen, scrubbing pots in cold water drawn from a stone trough. The lye soap stings your skin, turning your palms red and raw. Steam drifts from the hearth but does not reach your elbows. You dip rag after rag into the basin and wipe away layers of soot and stale food. Your clothes cling wet against your flesh, pressing the chill deeper into your bones. Next, you haul heavy stones for the wall that guards the cloister's garden. Each rock feels as heavy as regret. You bend, lift, and set it in place with careful precision. Mortar squeezes between your fingers, its lime paste burning like acid on open skin. You push each stone into the wall as a sculptor might carve flesh from marble, though your aim is only to build a barrier against the world's chaos. The afternoon brings the plough and the oxen that haul it through frozen fields. You strain to guide the share through soil that resists like iron. The beam presses into your shoulder, and the reins cut into your hands. Sweat beads on your brow despite the cold. Hunger gnaws in your gut with every turn of the furrow. When darkness falls, you move to the scriptorium by lantern light. You copy sacred texts in cramped Gothic script. Your wrist throbs so fiercely you fear the quill will fly from your grasp. Your neck locks with fatigue. Smoke from tallow candles stings your eyes and fills your lungs with grit. Still, you press on, letter by letter, driven by a vow you barely understand. The third candle gutter sputters and you refill the lamp with trembling hands. You press a rag to your brow, tasting soot on your lips. The page is complete at last, but your spirit feels as thin and frayed as the parchment beneath your quill. You bow your head in silent thanks for strength that comes only through suffering. A raid of pangs and dreams of warmth draw you to your pallet. You kneel briefly in prayer, then lie on straw so cold it steals your breath. Sleep carries you away from the body's torments, but only until the bell tolls again. You awaken to the same endless cycle: hunger, cold, labor, discipline. On feast days you taste meager sweetness in bread and watered wine, but suspicion mars every celebration. You sit beneath banners and candles, grateful for each crumb yet wary of envy and watchful eyes. Guilt shadows every joy. You bow your head and pray for a mercy you have not yet fully earned. When a moment of transgression slips through your vow of silence, you face the lash and ritual penance. The scourge cracks across your back, and your skin flares in fire and shame. You kneel on the cold floor, reciting psalms through tears. Your confession echoes in the hollow hall. You rise, cleansed but unmarked only in spirit, for your flesh still bears the scars of discipline. On pilgrimage you march through mud and fever, following broken paths to distant shrines. You ford swollen streams that bite your calves and carry fevered companions begging for water. You climb rocky passes with blistered feet. You sleep under starless skies and dream of bread and coffee you will never taste. Each step is an act of devotion that tests the limits of flesh. Finally, you return to the cloister, your body ravaged and aching. You cross the threshold with awe and dread. The silence greets you like an old friend. Your brothers bow in welcome. You bow in humility. You know that no amount of feast or festival can erase the memory of frost and hunger you carry beneath your robes. You kneel at the chapel's altar and vow again to serve. You taste sorrow, perseverance, hope, and doubt, all mingled in one moment of sacred stillness. You realize that only one who has walked through each trial can understand the toll of this life. You would not last a day as a medieval monk unless you bore a spirit forged in ice and hunger, tested by labor and discipline, and bound by a vow stronger than any fleshly need. In that vow lies a fierce pride that only suffering can reveal.